Hello and welcome to the Infinite Frequencies podcast. Okay, friends, so I am excited about this part one of a two-part episode about finding our voice. Finding our voice. We all have something to say. We all have a story to tell. And the way that we tell or present our story is just what somebody else needs. Now, the way that we present our story is exactly what some people need. It's exactly what some people need to hear specifically, is the way that we do it. Even now, the way that I'm speaking is a way that some people will be able to resonate with more than others. Others may hear the way that I speak and it may not resonate with them. It just may not be something that the way that I communicate, the way that I put words together is not the way that others would like to hear it. However, there's something very important. I'm going to say for me, I'm going to own this about telling my story, about me communicating me. So I'm just going to say telling our story is communicating us. I am communicating me. When I'm telling you my story, I am communicating me to you. I'm communicating me to others outwardly. And often when I'm communicating my story outwardly, I'm learning while I'm communicating, and I'm also communicating to me. So I want to share that I have a dear friend that sent me a video one time. And this video was from a life coach, Gabby Bernstein. And I pressed play on this video, and she talked about how everybody has a story to share. And when I heard those words, it's almost as if my experience was this. It was as if something like shifted in my body, or something like connected on like a DNA level, core level of like my life purpose and mission was connected to that statement that everyone has a story to share. And I don't quite know why it affected me like it did. I remember after recording some videos of myself talking and thinking that maybe it was the time for me to start doing videos on YouTube, and I didn't end up doing that. It's not what I ended up doing at the time. However, now there's this podcast, and it's obviously time as it's happening. So, what is the story that you have to share? What is it that you've been longing to say? What is it that you've been longing to communicate? What is it that for perhaps some of you, what is it that you are just it's like it's dying to come out. I have a feeling that that will really resonate with some people. So I feel that it's very important to do this particular show. That experience that I had, my dear friend that sent this video, um, yeah, is really, really interesting. It just went to such a core level. So I'm so very excited to discuss this, talk about this, and I'm going to talk about how part of my voice, um, a big part of my voice in this world is music, and how I had repressed that for so long and why. So I was raised religiously, and before I continue, what I'm about to talk about actually has nothing to do with the religion that I was involved in. It had to do with my beliefs about myself in relation with this religion and in relation with my beliefs about God. So I was raised in a Christian religion, particular Christian religion. Which one, it doesn't matter. Maybe I'll talk about that at some point at another podcast. Um, However, it ultimately doesn't matter. What matters is that I decided, as I was a part of this, that the only type of music I should be making is hymns, because hymns would be what's most pleasing to God. Well, a friend introduced me to something called raves, and I went to my first rave in Salt Lake City in like 1993, and it blew my mind, and I loved it. And I had loved electronic music since I first started hearing electronic music through like MTV, music television, and some of the songs of the in the 80s that were very electronic. And I always loved synthesizer sounds, and I found that I really ended up liking a 4/4 beat. And even with the first song that I heard on MTV, I watched the very first day that it aired, and it was by the Buggles, and it was Video Killed the Radio Star, and it has a 4/4 beat, and I loved that. It was a very odd song and very odd video, and certainly video did not kill the radio star. Radio's still around, though video is uh, super important now. Um, and I still think radio is one of the dopest types of technologies, even though it's old, just because you can just send it over airwaves. You don't have to have an internet connection to hear it. Just antennas, and I don't know the mechanics behind it. Anyway, so for the longest time, I I didn't pursue anything with music because I knew that I wanted to pursue something that had strong rhythm and synthesizer sounds, and sometimes even was driving and felt a little bit dark, and I felt guilty about that. And so I didn't want to ever pursue that, to even allow myself to do that. And I was craving to do that. It's like keeping that in. And a dear friend, and you know who you are, buddy, asked me one day to promise him that I would start doing something with my music. And I'm quite sure that he has seen for some time what's within me, and that needs to come out. It needs to be shared with the world. And I thank you for that, buddy. I love you, brother. And and so I'm doing it. So here's what I will share on why that's so important. So in the previous podcast, of which I want to acknowledge, if I were going to rate the very first podcast, and I love that I can talk about this stuff because it's my show. And because it's my show, I can talk about it however I want. And I'm also aware that right now in this room, there's a heating fan that's on, and it might be creating some sort of background noise. Well, hey, that makes the show kind of different. And I just don't care because it's my show. So, oh my goodness. What was I getting around to? Here's what happens. Here's what happened to me when I started to pursue what I love, which is music. I started to learn my music software and decided that I wanted to become 80% proficient in this software so that I could create whatever I wanted with this software. And I also have a love of DJing and have DJed for a while. Essentially since the late 90s is when I started. However, this is what I'm getting around to, is I DJ a thing called ecstatic dance. And ecstatic dance is a free form, I would just call it like a modern day hippie dance, that goes through this kind of metamorphosis of change. Usually they're about 2 hours long-ish, varies, but 2 hours long-ish, and no talking on the dance floor. Essentially all nonverbal, except for there can be screams and shouts and yells, and however, no regular talking, and that's on purpose. And it starts off with a slow beginning, and then eventually builds to a peak, and then eventually comes back down. That's a very simplistic version of an ecstatic dance. And the experience I've had DJing ecstatic dances has been profound. For me, the way that it's been profound, one of the main ways it's been profound, is I feel so much like me when I'm doing it. It feels like the most natural thing in the world for me to do, as if I was born to do it. So I could say I found my calling. And it's my love, it's my joy. I celebrated my 30th live ecstatic dance a few months ago. And 30th of live DJing. And it's my joy. And what kind of surprised me. Actually ended up bringing me into tears uh, after the first time that it happened. And people have said this to me several different times, is they love when they see me up there smiling and having a great time and into it and passionate, and it's like that helps them have a great time. However, they love seeing me up there happy. They love seeing me up there happy. That's incredible. Thank you, people. Thank you. That's incredible. That's not something I'm used to. So it's something I love. And my first few dances that I DJ'd, I was still learning what I was doing. I had put together a playlist, and it was very fixed because I was struggling with going from slow beats per minute to faster when there was a peak and then coming back down again. That was all very new to me. I always used to like raves and clubs where you've just got a beat that's just like, you know, and that's very continual, and you can just match to that, and you can kind of, you know, bring it up slowly or bring it down slowly. However, going from like, let's say as slow as 60 beats per minute up to maybe 125 beats per minute at a peak, this is just an example, it varies. It can vary. Is a particular process. 60 to 125 is quite a jump, right? And then back down again. So there's ways of doing that, ways of having that be smooth transitions, and that. And different DJs have their own ways of doing that are ecstatic dance DJs. Um, Folks, it's worth. I'm going to say it like this because this is my experience. And this is just my wording. This is my wording. And so some can call this source, some can call this universe. I'm going to call it God. And you can call it goddess too. It's whatever works for you, okay? God put in you something special. God put in you a spark for a reason. And sometimes with that spark, for the most part, you are the one that's aware of that spark inside of you that was placed in you divinely. And others may not be aware of it at all. Those that are close to you may be aware of it and may talk to you about it. And that's a blessing indeed if they do. So it's there for a reason. It needs to be shared for a reason. It needs to come out of you. It needs to be to. So if there's a spark, eventually then there's a flame, there's a fire. It needs to turn into a fire within you, so to speak, for a reason. And that reason, you have glimpses of that reason. However, you're not going to really know what that reason is until you end up doing it. And all I will say from my experience is that it's worth it. It's so worth it. To be able to experience the core of me is I don't know how to put a price on it. It's very, very valuable. It's about as valuable as value gets. There's that saying, know thyself, know thyself. Expanding the spark within you. In other words, turning that spark into a flame through action and persistence and many, many quote unquote failures. We fail in this life over and over and over. It's how we learn. We fail, and then we get better. We fail and we get better. It's part of the process. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. And this thing that we love that's inside of us is there for a reason. And the wonderful thing about that which is inside of us, this passion that we have, is we have almost like an unlimited amount of energy to put towards that. And it keeps the fire fueled, so to speak. And using these terms of fire, I'm considered a Pisces based on my birth date and time and location. Actually, Pisces sun and Pisces moon. So like really a Pisces, right? So to use these words fire, which I think in my whole chart, there's very little fire at all. I think there's some, but there's not a lot. My chart sort of points to like, I'm just like a spirit floating around on Earth that somehow got a body or something. It's very weird. Very odd experience. And this doesn't necessarily have to do with telling your story. I guess it does. However, I'll just say this. If you want to know what it's like to be a Pisces sun and a Pisces moon, or maybe just a Pisces in general, it's this. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. Life, most of the time, seems like a big and odd dream. Yeah. Like the word surreal. It's real, but it's surreal. But it's like a surreal all the time kind of thing. It's strange. And not like all the time, it varies. It's kind of the trying to paint that a little bit. It's worth it, friends, to add wind to that flame, to fan the flame within you and build it. All I can say is it's worth it, and do it. Okay, so this third part of this podcast is about having our voice be heard amongst many, many other voices. So there's many, many other voices in this world speaking all sorts of things all the time. And the bottom line is, what does my voice have to say? All these other voices are no more important than my voice, in one sense. That, of course, could be argued. Some people have more important things to say than others. However, for this purpose, let's say for this podcast, I have these things to say. You have a voice that needs to be heard by others. If you feel like you do not have a voice, why is that? There's so many other voices around you already speaking. However, if we take a look at just one of those voices that's speaking with all the other voices that are speaking, and we pull one of those voices out, What if they decided that their voice wasn't worth sharing? So this seems to be a common theme with some people that I know, with some friends, is the importance of us using our voices and the importance of being seen. And I've noticed that the conversation has dwindled down a bit since I first started speaking, which is kind of interesting. It was very noisy earlier. And so then as I had noticing that I'm speaking, the noise gets less. It's kind of fascinating, kind of interesting. In fact, I experienced some anxiety a little bit just with that experience of talking with all the voices that are going on around me. So it's an interesting experience. So what is our voice? Our voice can be literally our speaking voice, the voice we use to speak to others that they can hear. Our voice can be music. Our voice can be art. Our voice can be actions. We can also speak with a lack of action. So voice could also be called communicating. So how are we using our voice to communicate with the world? How are you using your voice to communicate with the world? Is it being received? If it's not being received, or it seems like it's not being received, then why is that? So, something to think about, something to consider. And again, you have a voice to share. You have a voice that deserves to be heard. And sometimes, when we want to speak, there's loud voices around us that seem like they're trying to block our voice. However, sometimes your voice might be the one voice that needs to be heard, even beyond all the others. So, something to consider, and it's worth it to share your voice. All right, so how about for some music? Always original music at the Infinity Factory. And just to clarify, the way that Infinity, my alias, is spelled is INFIN, the number 8, and then the letter I. So kind of a non-standard spelling of that. Makes it easy to find. So this first track that I'm going to share, this excerpt, is called Uniko. Very excited about this. This is my first release of the year, and it will be on Spotify on the 10th of this month, February 10th, 2023. Again, it is called Uniko, and it is like a melodic kind of techno or trance type song. So here you go. Right, this next one is a fun track, and it's called Hiyaha. Okay, and this next track is called Levelz, not to be confused with the track by Avicii that was popular called Levelz. This one has a Z at the end, and enjoy. And this track is called Look Up. It's an inspiring track, and sometimes we just need to have some hope and know that things are going to get better and, so to speak, look up, maybe even with a smile on our face. Okay, so that wraps up episode 2. Episode 3 will be coming out in about a week. And thanks for listening.